month, I shared my presentation to the American Association of Petroleum Geologists entitled 100 Years of the San Juan Basin. I definitely put it into 20 minutes. So you can go to my YouTube channel. Today's IQ will delve more into the specifics of this winter. We've already seen it from natural gas prices rising this past summer on the backs of Europe and Asia's shortages, structural problems. Looking forward to hearing about that. What are some of the things that we'll be seeing out there in the calculus of the market and cooler weather? This is one of my favorite slides here. It's of the San Juan Basin 50-year production profile. My career started right here in 1980, and while we were drilling a lot of gas wells, we sort of had a little shortage there too. But as the Fruitland coal took off, it just went haywire there. So, anyways, it's been a great basin to work in, and many of you know that. I want to welcome Bryan Hassler. Thanks for coming today to this show, Bryan. Bryan is with SEMA Energy. He's VP of Strategy and Origination for the Western region. And looking forward to what Bryan has to share today. They have a really neat daily dashboard of weather and market report. So Bryan's email will be in the box if you want to see it, but they report on weather, all the various demand points across the country. Then they'll show the weather maps, which we get from a lot of services. This is all kind of a one-stop shopping place, which I've been getting for a while now. Then they show the heating degree days and how that compares in various regions. And then natural gas analytics across various markets, Canadian, NYMEX, the different spreads, and forward curve for the NYMEX. And anyways, ends up with some of the drilling EIA reports. So anyways, I just thought this was something, give you a little commercial, Bryan, not like you need it, but I thought this was an interesting map too, the drilling regions and how barrels are replaced and all that sort of stuff. So welcome, Bryan. Really appreciate you going on here. I know your time is valuable too. So
well, thank you very much. Thought I'd cover a couple of different points. Some of them may be San Juan Basin specific, some of them more pricing and generally volatility and what's going on in the marketplace, touch on infrastructure, touch on ESG, because I think that's such an important component for any producer and markets out there in the future, and then some long-term impacts to San Juan Basin and other basins within the United States. Many of you follow pricing here, and if you look at it 6 weeks ago, storage was certainly going to close out the season at all-time lows, or at least all-time lows over the last 5 years. I think moderation in temperatures as well as increases in production across the lower 48 have moderated pricing to a limited extent. We've come from a market that traded from a NYMEX standpoint in excess of $6 for the month of November. NYMEX for December delivery this year trading about $5. At least for the balance of, December this year, the balance of the year. That puts San Juan Basin prices right there at about $5.13 for the month of December delivery right now. Now, that being said, those are pricing points from yesterday. The market appears to be up 20-25 cents this morning on hints of maybe some cooler weather. And you're going to see, until we get weather to hit, you're going to see volatile days where the market's going to trade up 40 cents and down 50 and sideways until we get a better feel for how winter sets in, what the supply fundamentals look like, and where storage reacts to the weather that's ahead of us. So volatility, in the trading business, it's your best friend if you're on the right side of the curve. As producers, I think we can all and Mitsubishi is a producer in North America. We produce 550 million cubic feet a day in British Columbia. Ultimately, it'll go export West Coast of British Columbia. But as we start to take a look at the impacts on the San Juan Basin, you've got California pull, and certainly California is short supply relative to where they've been in the past, much of that due to Aliso Canyon and some of the other natural gas storage reservoirs that have been impacted by the blowout of Aliso Canyon. Moderating prices, the California PUC just allowed SoCal to increase working gas by 7 BCF to give some semblance of assurance to winter supplies in the California marketplace. Various folks that I've talked to say that will maybe take the needle peak off of a cold weather event, but we'll still have to watch how things move through the winter. And the market is most at risk, much like it was in February, when you anticipate, gee, I'm beyond kind of that winter peak. Things are going to go okay. Utilities are breathing a sigh of relief. They've still got gas in storage. And then you get a winter storm unprecedented in, say, the last 15 or 20 years that upended the apple cart and gave everybody notice for pause, whether you're market burning natural gas supply, how do you manufacture when prices went to $990 an MMBTU, San Juan Basin. Off the top of my head, I don't know where it traded, but the Rockies even traded $150 an MMBTU on the spot.
Yeah, we were a lot higher on our at least our February month was like 7 times what normal was. Well, normal's kind of a strange word these days.
Yeah, it certainly
the wellhead,
is.
it wasn't great, but it wasn't awful either.
So we're definitely going to be impacted by weather and storage impacts. San Juan Basin will be impacted as the Permian Basin begins to grow again. You get the associated gas and outlets that have been built and constructed over the last 12 to 36 months begin to fill. That gas tends to back into the San Juan Basin. San Juan Basin certainly a major supplier to California. When you look at the Rockies are short probably year on year, at least in the greater Green River Basin, because of lack of drilling. Rockies are down 2 to 250 million a day year on year in the Green River Basin alone. Yet in kind of the Piceance Basin, probably another 150 million a day of decline year on year due to lack of drilling. That kind of moves us from a pricing standpoint. And feel free to interrupt me at any point in time and ask me clarifying questions.
Yeah.
If there are pieces of information that you'd like greater detail in, just send a note to Jerry, and we're here to provide you with information that you need to assist your productions in growing in the future. I should note on the pricing standpoint, when you start to take a look at United States prices versus worldwide prices, predominantly Europe and Asia. Europe and Asia are trading in that for the balance of the winter, call it $30 an MMBTU range, and that's down from highs of $40 to $45 an MMBTU. And the decline is a function of two things: demand destruction, Europe and Asia, simply because prices are too high as an input in that manufacturing scenario to continue to manufacture products at a loss. I was talking to JP Morgan banker here late last week, and their gas trading group had never recognized that. I said, well, we're going to continue to have these constraints and bottlenecks in the supply chain due to high prices shutting down manufacturing activity and exacerbating and lengthening the supply chain issues. So, as we anticipate, we might be able to start buying our new Ford pickups or, vehicles, or that the supply chain on appliances will start to shorten. And I'm one of those caught in that. Ordered appliances in February, and supposedly they'll be delivered and installed in December this year. high energy prices could exacerbate supply chain issues that we've seen as a result of COVID. So something to take a look at and contemplate. From a pricing standpoint, you are seeing a number of different things or run-on impacts that could impact you. Daily pricing volatility is based upon the next minute's weather forecast at this stage of the game, or disruptions in supply, not only in San Juan Basin, but throughout the United States. So things that we've got to take a look at.
Someone threw out a question. The range of daily price fluctuations seem to be historically large. Is that true? Historically, or is it? Can we point to another time when it was like this?
I think I've seen greater price volatility in lower price environments, but you've got to go back sometime. Take a look at back when the Gulf made up a good portion of the U.S. supply basin. If you saw a storm brewing in the Gulf and its impact on production in the United States, I think the volatility during the Gulf's heyday due to hurricane season was to a large extent much more than it is now, taking out the February event where we get an Arctic front that literally covered 2/3 of the United States.
Right. I mean, I've noticed here recently in the last, in this episode here, is this a permanent, not permanent, but is this more of a structural step up in the base price for natural gas? I mean, are we going to go back to the sub $2 gas, or is the volatility in a higher range these days? That's the concern I have, honestly.
Yeah, personally, I think we've had a step change in terms of where natural gas should be, and it's a function of restraint from producers, both private equity backed and majors. I think some of that restraint is due to balance sheets that are heavy with debt, banks that are conservative relative to the oil and gas industry and have lost money on bankruptcies over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. They're pulling back their reserve-based lending facilities, gives some of those producers access to less capital. There's a market demand in this industry to dividend out cash that limits the amount of capital for future growth. So I think if we can remain level-headed in this environment, if there's not, there won't be on a go-forward basis, I believe, as much access to capital to accelerate drilling and accelerate production at all costs. It probably leaves us at a higher level of pricing than what we've seen in the past. But we've all seen that access to low-cost capital and growing for growth's concern as opposed to for profitability does tend to destroy the foundation of pricing for this industry too.
That seems to be happening in Permian, at least with oil, a little bit. That they're getting ramped up to drill more down there. I mean, they've dropped off. There's been some decline in average daily oil that we've seen down there, and there's obviously been the commensurate decline in associated. I mean, luckily, there's more pipes to the Gulf Southeast, and there's more bleed off into Mexico, just 6, 7 a day. I understand.
Yeah, and
so, I mean, does it happen in pockets where there might be drilling that can threaten at least the San Juan Basin? And Marcellus is another world, but that tends to affect us indirectly.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into the next topic of discussion. That's infrastructure, what it can do on pricing, price volatility. Before, a lot of those new pipelines out of the Permian were built into the Gulf, into Corpus, to feed the LNG market and seeking better pricing. A lot of the Permian found its way into the San Juan Basin, which battered prices in the basin. the El Paso South Mainline explosion, still no explanation as to what caused that particular failure on that South Mainline system and its long-term impact on feeding California and West Mexico export markets. So yet to be seen, but that took half a BCF a day of capacity out in terms of ability to flow the California border, excuse me. And I think we have to anticipate that as old as the infrastructure is that serves California, that there will be maintenance issues and constraint points in the future due to the need to repair old pipe and to maintain the integrity of the pipe. I think restraints to growth relative to plant infrastructure. You saw Jerry's production curve for the San Juan Basin. Realize a lot of that growth was built on the heels of Section 29 tax credits, the U.S. being in short supply, anticipating imports, trying to stimulate demand, and that's what drove a lot of the San Juan Basin demand and supply. I think when you look at supply in the future, Jerry was telling me pre-show that the horizontal drilling and completion techniques have enhanced the capabilities to reach more virgin rock, and the IPs that you're seeing in some of these San Juan Basin wells approach 30 million cubic feet a day. The fact that we've got existing infrastructure, I think, is helpful, but at 30 million a day, it doesn't take many wells to start to overwhelm some of the plant capacity that may have been taken out of service over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. Some of the amine treating capacity that has traditionally been in place in the San Juan Basin, and then the other infrastructure constraint, I would say, is just people, personnel, and an ability to find steel in a marketplace where commodities have approached or hit all-time highs, have receded a little bit, but there are going to be supply chain constraints that limit our ability to ramp rapidly into the future.
And I've been delving into that a bit. I on the way to the San Juan conference, I visited with a midstream guy on let's just say that he was with Enterprise, and how much extra capacity does Enterprise have in the basin moving gas from the field to the plant to the main line. And so it appears to me that there's at least from Chaco plant, and there's probably an excess of at least 300 a day. Ignacio, which is a harvest plant, seems to be pretty full. And then the other plants out there that I know that some of the things have been stripped out of the plants. And so I've had this diagram, which I'll pull out of my briefcase here in a sec, which is rather garbled, but I'm trying to understand what that looks like for the San Juan. What it looks like for me. What does it look like for these new Mancos gas? 18. Some of these wells, Nebu wells, were 13 million a day flat for 7 months. So, I mean, that's quite a. You drill 20 of those, and you might have takeaway issues at the wellhead. So,
yeah, definitely.
And then you talk at the end line, the pinch point at the south line. Last month we covered when the El Paso line was built. They went through the Federal Power Commission and got all their contracts lined up in about. I don't know how the story went from start to finish, but it seemed like it was a year and a half, and some of that is pretty amazing that they did it so quickly compared to today's world, which would be a decade and a half to get that stuff done.
Yeah, and then you get a pipeline in the ground, and you've got the potential that it could be shut down as well. So I think it's tougher and tougher to build new infrastructure in the future just because of permitting in the U.S. um, tougher and tougher, as everybody knows, to drill in certain locations in Colorado. 2,000-foot offsets are required now, which limits access to some of the minerals that are still available here in the basin. Colorado's got some of the toughest methane emissions rules and regulations in the nation, and it looks like after the first year there will be bills introduced that make those even tougher requirements. What does that mean? If you can't, if you don't have an ability to limit emissions, and starting to talk into the ESG segment of this, if you can't limit emissions, states will shut you down. I think the Biden administration would love to charge producers for their methane intensity at a much costlier rate than what CO2 carbon offsets might cost. I was talking to an investor here yesterday. Theoretically, 550 million cubic feet a day. If you've got a methane intensity 1.4%, your fines could approach $90 million a year under certain rules and regulations being contemplated by the commission. I think that's
for Colorado.
That's in Colorado, yes. But I think if the feds start to take a look at carbon and the methane multiplier, these are things that are going to exacerbate pricing pressure and expense pressure for a number of producers just to stay within compliance and avoid those fines that are tough to overcome if you've got a balance sheet that's leveraged, if you've got a balance sheet that's heavy on hedges that were put on a year or 2 years ago, and you're still struggling to get out of an old hedge book into a new hedge book. Things
almost like you're hedging your fines.
Yeah. I think the other thing producers in the San Juan Basin need to take a look at is their carbon footprint. I know high CO2 content. A lot of that CO2 is being emitted through plant facilities. Those operators are smart, and they'll find a way for producers to pay for those particular emissions. I think you have to start to take a look at not just state rules and regulations or federal rules and regulations, but start to drill into the ESG metrics of utilities you might be selling to, end users you might be selling to, who have a corporate mandate to reduce carbon footprint. So if you've got a high carbon footprint, high methane intensity, high CO2 venting, I think your end use customers are going to start to look with a fine-tooth comb at what that carbon footprint looks like on each molecule down to the wellbore. And right. There's certainly a march in process to force producers to be better, I guess, world stewards in a world that is seeking kind of zero carbon footprint by 2050.
Right. Well, it's the reality and the policy are, will they even come together? Oh, that's what I always ask myself.
Yeah.
Without us choking and crawling into caves and living, heating our houses with firewood, which is even worse for the environment.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone asks about maybe it's an obvious question: pipeline construction and current infrastructure going forward, is that a concern? And looped into that, do you know if anything in the recently signed infrastructure bill has anything to do with updates, upgrades, maintenance for interstate gas transporters?
I haven't had an opportunity to read completely through the bill, but when you look at, some of the East Coast pipelines where billions were spent over the course of half a decade to get those projects permitted, and ultimately the projects were pulled from the marketplace simply because the environmental backlash against any new infrastructure on the East Coast has been so horrific. You look at Energy Transfer's crude oil pipeline out of the Bakken has been in service for 3 years. Still, folks bent on shutting down that particular pipeline facility, even though the environmental footprint of a pipeline versus trucks versus railing and the safety associated with pipelining hydrocarbons is so much more safer. There's folks afoot looking to shut down infrastructure that we all depend upon. I look at Spire Utilities, serves St. Louis, built a 65, 70 mile piece of pipe to bolster the infrastructure into St. Louis. And there's still a fight afoot on whether the Army Corps of Engineers issued the proper permits for that pipe, and folks battling with FERC and in the courts to shut that particular piece of pipe down, and it just came into service last year. So there's a multiple fronts and headwinds that producers and markets, I believe, will face in the future, and a lot of it will be infrastructure rate driven, or the inability to build infrastructure that prohibits growth.
Do you anticipate any more, not anticipate, but do you foresee that the Texas February freeze and many of these blackouts, are they just going to become more business as usual for the United States? Brownouts, heatouts, freezes?
Let's hope not. I think Texas is pretty bent on making sure that a number of facilities that went down last February or this past February, that weatherization will assist. I think they've got a better appreciation now for natural gas lost out, not so much because it wasn't available. It's because Texas cut off power to gas plants that were critical to supplying natural gas to natural gas fired infrastructure. So it's I think it was a confluence of events. Coal was freezing up and lignite was freezing up. You had icing conditions, so turbines couldn't spin in the wind. So it's I think February was definitely a wake-up call to there's a lot that we've got to do to firm up the infrastructure in the United States. Nobody wants to pay for it, but at the end of the day, we as consumers are going to pay for kind of bolstering the infrastructure in the United States, whether it's on the gas side, coal side, the nukes, wind, solar power, battery backup. It's an eye opener that you need it all during this energy transition until we get to a more stable system with respect to electric generation, battery backup, cleaner gas plants. I still, with carbon capture, I think coal has a future and can be proven to be as clean as, say, a natural gas fired power plant, albeit with expense. But I think coal has seen its last hurrah. I doubt that you'll ever see another coal plant built. And gas is the next soldier in line.
Which is ironic because gas hardly has the carbon footprint and emissions that coal or fuel oil does. I mean, it's 25% of coal, half of oil, half of crude oil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ironic. I mean, like we talked about, the Beyond Coal people wanted to go after the coal people, and And I never cheer when an energy form of energy goes out of favor because they're going to come after me next. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think attention to methane intensity, getting your methane intensity levels as low as possible will help natural gas become a part of that kind of energy transition. And I'm hopeful part of the long-term solution with respect to energy infrastructure.
yes. So on the export tab here, I mean, we see how much demand there is in Asia and how much, for instance, the Western states, tribal nations are working to expand markets to Asia from the Rocky Mountains. There's a plant going in Baja, a Costa Azul plant that's going to be ready in 2024. They're thinking of adding on maybe a half a unit to at least to keep it up. But that's just a minuscule amount of West Coast takeaway for Rocky Mountain gas compared to what Asia's demand is. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So, Coastal Azul will certainly be the first West Coast plant to provide LNG to Asia. Gulf Coast, you do it indirectly through the Panama Canal, but exports a half a BCF a day, say Costa Azul, you'll be looking at 2 BCF a day. And as much as hard as it believes, Canadian gas does impact, San Juan supplies and pricing. But once you get a 2 BCF a day facility built off of the west coast of British Columbia, and that's in process, under construction, get Port Arthur and a couple of these other export facilities, the pull will be away from San Juan Basin, which provides the San Juan Basin an opportunity to kind of supply all those points. California certainly being the predominant point. It'll be short gas and short gas for quite some time.
Okay, well, I mean, I know we're going to be moving into ESG. The hydrogen plants that are on the books in the San Juan Basin, the McKinney County Prewitt, 200 and some megawatt plant for hydrogen, those sorts of things. Can you talk about them now too?
Yeah, I mean, SEMA's wholly owned subsidiary Mitsubishi, and Mitsubishi, not to kind of give you a commercial here, they probably have the best turbine technology in the world in terms of burning hydrogen. And they've laid out, you all have probably seen publicly, kind of their hydrogen hub concept, hydrogen corridor. First hydrogen plant will be to replace a coal unit at the Intermountain Power Facility in Utah, be an 800 megawatt facility capable initially of burning 30% hydrogen, technology capable to burn 100% hydrogen. So it's and in that particular instance, the hydrogen will be green. There's a lot of wind and solar that can be tapped into off-peak power times to generate hydrogen, which then will be stored in salt caverns and capable of serving the swing loads of that particular asset. Costs of hydrogen are still very high. You get hints that people are at least targeting 2030 when renewable hydrogen is competitive with alternative fuels, and those fuels being natural gas, fuel oil, coal. But it's a lofty task. I think the hydrogen needs to be co-located with, say, generation facilities. One, to provide for hydrogen storage, and two, transporting hydrogen in traditional natural gas pipelines. 10% maybe the maximum that you can transport hydrogen's got less than half the fuel density of natural gas. So it's kind of a slippery slope. Interesting fact, though, I was doing some hydrogen research this weekend. Bloomberg's got a little paper that they've done, Hydrogen 101. Hydrogen moves at about 3 or 4 times the speed of natural gas in a pipeline. So in theory, you could move almost as much energy with hydrogen in a pipe because it has an ability to move faster, or the frictional component is less than that of natural gas. So it's a
lighter,
a risk that we've got to look at into the future. Certainly when you look at natural gas, manufacturing, chemical sector, and electric generation make up a good portion of natural gas usage. Got to anticipate that hydrogen is going to impact that demand to some extent, but I think it'll be cost driven. Now, to put it in corollary, I can remember 200 megawatt an hour solar facilities. I can remember $80 megawatt hour wind facilities, and the cost curve of the last decade has brought solar inside of $30 in larger installations inside the $20 a megawatt hour. Wind have seen lower double-digit per megawatt hour prices on newer projects where you've got 3 megawatt turbines, a lot more efficient than the old 2 or 1 megawatt turbines, or if you went back 20 or 25 years, kind of the 300-400 kilowatt turbines of old. So it's, I think much like everything else, the hydrogen curve could drop much more rapidly than what folks anticipate at this stage of the game.
Someone poses a question around that. I mean, maybe short term it's going to be more challenging. How do you foresee the American Jobs Act investment of $8 billion of clean hydrogen impacting natural gas demand and ultimately pricing over the next decade? You sort of answered it there. But.
Yeah, demand will be incremental, in short increment, just because I think we're just reaching that large scale commercial phase of the hydrogen economy. You've had hydrogen, fuel cells across a number of applications, space probably being the number one area for fuel cells, but you look at all these units in warehouses, so small incremental demand. There's debate as to whether it winds up in the transportation sector. Certainly will wind up in the power sector. And then we've got to see kind of whereabouts it falls relative to kind of the utility sector. I will say that we work with a number of utilities. Some of them are strictly natural gas distribution utilities that are already looking at hydrogen as a part of their energy transition portfolio.
Now, so the cost today it's astronomical to produce hydrogen today under current scenario. There's just not the plants.
Well, especially green hydrogen, steam methane reforming is the predominant production mechanism by which hydrogen is produced today. The costs are much lower, but typically you're taking a methane molecule and turning it into hydrogen and CO2. Current regulations allow you to vent that CO2, but I think we'll find that if you add the carbon capture component to steam methane reforming, it probably puts you more price competitive than green hydrogen at this stage of the game, but that curve could shift rapidly.
Well, I know that the San Juan Basin has got their name in the hat for the hydrogen hub. Impact areas that are impacted for that, as well as the Permian. And talking with some colleagues last week, they thought that the 4 initial hubs would be Gulf Coast, West Virginia for obvious reasons, Michigan because there's an energy secretary that's from there, and then maybe Los Angeles. So, I mean, I think the state of New Mexico and all that we've worked on there, Western States Tribal Nations group is still pushing for the San Juan Basin, especially since we have plants that are being abandoned and could be converted. So
definitely something to watch. But yeah, I think 30 years ago, we could all, I believe, fairly plan for the next 5 years and make a reach to 10 years out on long-term budgeting, forecasting. The pace of change in technology makes it tougher and tougher to invest in new resources that may be irrelevant over the course of the next 5 to 7 years because of new technological breakthroughs.
right. Well, I mean, every time I hear the word energy transition, I just think that's just it'll probably continue through the rest of my life. And I'm not exactly young, but I'm not old, so I think it's going to be a long time.
I agree, and I think natural gas factors into the equation very well.
I mean, we have any more of these blackouts and these really kind of standard of living reduction events. I mean, who would ever thought that people in our neighborhood would be considering backup generators?
Mm-hmm.
People considering those sorts of things because they don't trust the utilities and the policies that are being thrust down our throats, just as a consumer.
Yeah. So
in the long-term impacts, Bryan, where are you seeing drilling activity? I know the San Juan's been relatively slow. We just had not so good news on Friday that the Biden administration is extending the buffer around Chaco Canyon National Park to 10 miles, which is going to take some drilling, going to shut down drilling essentially. I don't know what they're going to do about the production, notwithstanding that the Navajo Latis in the area are probably going to be as impacted as hard as anybody. I mean, I don't know why you have a national park and then you have a 10-mile buffer to make the national park. I mean, it just doesn't seem right. That's the world in which we live. Where do you see these activities happening? What does your microscope say? Because you have that great last slide on drilling activity and those sorts of things.
Yeah, so obviously the Permian remains front and center just because the economics are so great down there in most areas. Things are replicable within a particular area. The thing you've got to watch out for in the Permian Basin is, does the world market drive their acceptance of Permian gas as part of their LNG fleets? But we hear anecdotes that there are certain European companies that are LNG exporters that have been mandated not to purchase supplies in the Permian Basin and the Williston Basin just because of the amount of flaring activity that's going on in aggregate there. The DJ Basin, I think, is somewhat threatened by Colorado rules and regulations. Certainly a setback. I think most producers would say we've got 2,000-foot setbacks kind of dialed in, figured out. There are a few producers that are along the I-25 corridor that may be impacted more than others. Haynesville, definitely, bright spot. Has exceeded previous records made in 2008. The economics look very viable and sort of the entry gate to, kind of everything LNG and export oriented. So
Gulf Coast especially, yeah, they're right there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the other thing you've got going in the Haynesville and the Permian, to a lesser extent because it's crude oriented, Eagle Ford, Permian, crude oriented, although I've always liked the gas window in the Eagle Ford. I think you'd find some transportation constraints. Haynesville, has access to that LNG corridor. It's clean, it's prolific. I think folks have plenty of running room. So you'll see the Haynesville continue to grow. Appalachia, tremendous amount of growth. When we were working Rockies Express out of the Rockies, that seemed to be the place to go. And, Lordy, you've got the biggest producing province in North America in Appalachia.
Right.
I don't think infrastructure constraints continue to hold back production there. I think producer discipline will keep production levels kind of static, slight growth during certain seasons of the year. But I think your primary growth is Permian Haynesville, with Bakken being close behind, although the tier 1 and tier 2 acreage, tier 1 certainly has been drilled in Bakken. So growth, for the longest time, I can recall 50 BCF a day was about as much as we could get out of the ground, and we did it year in and year out. We're here at 90 BCF a day, plenty of resource, but we've got a lot of federal, state regulatory hurdles that could impede future process.
Right. A lot of lead times to get those things done, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially with all the federal land here in this part of the country right here.
I mean, federal land, you've certainly got to take a look at what that license to operate is, and adhere to and go beyond the rules and regulations to make sure you've got the cleanest product in the marketplace.
Right. Well, I put your map up here because I've been looking at this for a while on the EIA data, and 1,000 cubic feet per day added per rig or per area, and it's just such an interesting chart. And I'm trying to get you guys to color in the San Juan Basin here in Niobrara, because I think that's a significant area for your map. So
yeah, I think this is more of a heat map for drilling. So the San Juan Basin, like you said, there's not a whole lot of activity down there.
Right.
So
That's right.
If it picks up, it'll start to show up on that heat map as well.
Right. Anything else that you could foresee here with your wrap up comments? I mean, I think this will lead to our next month's IQ on long term, looking out past a year to 5 years, I think so.
Yeah, drilling activity will continue, especially if prices remain elevated. I think producers, a $5 world looks good. It doesn't exacerbate the consumer to a great degree. We've been there before. If we can maintain a semblance of order, not over drill, not outspend cash flow, the course looks good from a pricing perspective in the future. Exports will help to add to demand for U.S. gas. Renewables will continue to chew into some of the consumptive nature of natural gas, and coal conversions. It's unfortunate. I think a lot of utilities that I talk to would love to use natural gas as kind of their workhorse fuel in the future. Public utility commissions aren't necessarily seeing it that way, and there's been pushback on some gas-fired units that have been proposed across the United States because commissions and the populace want green. But with green comes uncertainty with respect to, is the wind blowing, is the sun shining, is my backup battery charged, and then how does the marketplace allow me to utilize all those resources to keep my customers happy.
Right. And are you seeing industrial demand slacken off? I'd heard some reports of that, some forward-looking research had shown U.S. domestic manufacturing fertilizers and things like that because of the high price of gas is
Yeah, but
converting.
ammonia is certainly a fuel that the world's looking at from a hydrogen perspective. NH3 ammonia serves as a good carrier of dense hydrogen. Mitsubishi is working on turbines capable of burning 100% ammonia. When you look at $35 an MMBtu gas inputs for ammonia facilities across the world versus call it $5 or $6 an MMBtu here, there's still a big draw with respect to our low energy prices and our ability now from an energy perspective to compete across the world with respect to manufacturing capability.
Okay, well, we appreciate your time, Bryan. Thank you so much for being with us. This is a good wrap up, and hope people, if they want to look back on this, we'll have this on the on our website and available for everyone to look at here going forward. Please visit our website for past webinars and links to our social media pages. We're still trying to figure a lot of stuff out, but it's a lot of fun. And thanks to Bryan and for all the participants who joined us. Next month, December 21st, Tuesday, 9 a.m. We'll expand on where Bryan left off here, look at longer term natural gas outlook and how that affects the San Juan Basin. We'll be looking out past the next year, talk about the new projects, the hub that we're trying to form in the San Juan Basin, demand heating up with our energy transition. And like I say, I think that's going to go on and on and on, this energy transition. So we thank you all. Thank you again, Bryan. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you much.
We'll see you next time in a month, third Tuesday, December 21st. Take care and bye for now.